Tai ilgai netemsiu, iš karto tada pristatysiu. Sekantis pranešimas yra Kodėl jūsų darbo pokalbiai kartais nepavyksta. Pranešimas vyks anglų kalba, o pranešimas skaitys Head of Talent Acquisition at SEB Andrius Gintautas.
Thank you for a kind introduction. I'm Andrius and I'm heading talent acquisition in SEB Global Services. And in my previous roles, I used to hire people for around 10 years for my teams and other large organizations. And in this period, I think I identified 3 key elements that, in my opinion, make a job interview go well. But before, let me draw a fun comparison. I'm sure plenty of you must have been on a date at some point in your lives, and back in the day, I also went on a few. And from this experience, I learned that dating is actually a skill, and if it is a skill, well, then you can grow and develop and get better at it. I also find that the 3 key elements that I think are important at interviewing, those are the same that are relevant at dating. But let me tell you what those are. First of all, it's attention, it's authenticity, trying to be a little bit more authentic, and lastly, having ambition in our lives. So attention, how can you show attention at a job interview? When we are thinking about recruitment processes at large organizations like SEB Global Services, we have scale in mind. We are receiving thousands of applications every month for the hundreds of positions we are offering globally. That does not change the fact that you will be interviewed by a person, and thus it is important to leave a good impression for this person. In my opinion, the easiest way to impress is actually to make sure that you do your homework. It's important to come for an interview prepared, and it's probably nothing new, but it's often important to mention it to get it through. But I can tell you that it is obvious when somebody is applying for a position and they didn't really invest the time before the interview. The interviewer, the recruiter, or the hiring manager will always notice that, because if somebody invested the time and they learned about the position and they learned about the organization prior to the interview, they will have a much better understanding about the position. They will be asking smarter questions, as opposed to somebody who didn't really invest their time before. So I would suggest maybe stay away from questions such as about working hours or parking spaces in the office. You can figure that out before or after the interview, but instead you can ask something a little smarter than that. For example, I would suggest that you ask, why did this position become vacant in the first place? Why are you guys looking for a replacement? You might hear that maybe the person who was previously in your position, in this position you're applying for, they might have been promoted, or they moved internally to some other position in the organization. And well, that's of course just good news, because it shows that there are growth opportunities at this organization. It doesn't really matter what the answer is, but here you are learning valuable context that later might become useful when you are starting in the new role. One interview technique that I like using myself is, instead of telling the person, the candidate, what is the role about, I will ask them to give an explanation in their own words. How do they see it? And sometimes candidates will give a quite accurate explanation. I can fill in the blanks and I correct the mistakes. But that just shows that the person understands where they are going. If, however, they are not capable of providing a good enough explanation, maybe it's very shallow and high detail, well, then I would be questioning whether this candidate is actually interested in the role, and I would be questioning their motivation. So that's a simple way to do our homework and to make sure that we leave a good impression at the job interview. But what about authenticity? Many of you must have heard that you need to try to be yourself at the job interview, but what does it really mean? In my opinion, it probably means that we must be brave enough to show some of our weaknesses. And one of the tasks of an interviewer, of a recruiter, is to figure out how do you respond to pressure. And they, for instance, might ask a question, what your weaknesses are. And of course, we are interested what those are, but we are not expecting an answer such as, I'm lazy, or I'm always late. That's not what we are looking for. But if you think about it ahead of time and you prepare for a question like this, you might actually come up with a better answer, with a smarter answer. For instance, you might say that I want to improve my communication skills. In order to do that, I have volunteered to give a public presentation. And in fact, that is part of the reason why I am here today as well. So that's a simple way to show that you are comfortable with your weaknesses, that you know what those are, and that you're actively doing something about them. Sometimes candidates might answer this question by trying to make a positive look like a negative. So they will say that I pay too much attention to details, or I must finish the task that I started. But it's immediately obvious that here the candidate is trying to dodge the question, and it doesn't really work like that. So really think about what is it that you want to improve yourself on, and where are you putting your effort to do that. Reality is simple. You are one of many candidates applying for the position, and nobody wants to see you fail. The sooner we find a good fit for the position, the sooner we can move on with our busy days. That's why I think it's important that we are brave enough at the job interview to be a little bit more authentic. So that's about authenticity and also ambition. And I think it is very important that we have ambition in our lives. And here I don't necessarily mean that we must want to climb the corporate ladder and become leaders. It could be something as simple as being brave enough to switch a career, or and committing to that. Or you could also say that I'm working on improving myself so I could be the best version of myself that I could be. Without ambition, I think it is very difficult to expect the person to fully apply themselves and do more than the minimum required. And I think many business leaders are looking for that in their candidates. Most of our work is actually around solving problems. And it is such a relief having those colleagues who are capable of going around proactively figuring out what those problems are and also offering solutions to solve them. That just makes it so much easier to work. Sometimes managers are looking for someone stable because they know that maybe the position they're offering is not very complex, and maybe an ambitious person will very quickly outgrow and will want to leave. And of course, finding a replacement for this manager, well, that's an inconvenience. So sometimes they would rather have somebody who maybe is less ambitious in this role, however, is willing to stay a bit longer. In my opinion, I think you would be dodging a bullet if you're not afraid to show ambition, if you're not afraid to tell what is it that you want in your life, you might just end up in a job where you don't really have many growth opportunities, and maybe your manager is not super invested in your growth either. So show ambition. Don't be afraid to tell what is it that you want. I think it sends a clear signal that you're focused and determined and you can apply yourself. There it is, ambition, attention, and being authentic. If you get these three right, if you have sufficient enough competence for the role, I think you will be among the top candidates most of the time. Therefore, I think interviewing is also a skill, and we can work on our soft skills in order to develop and get better at it. I'm convinced that there's people who are amazing at what they do in their daily jobs, but maybe not so great at interviewing. I'm pretty sure they will be losing on some opportunities. And there's others who maybe are not so great at everyday jobs, but they're excellent at interviewing, and those are the ones that are getting those positions. And if I could circle back a little bit to my previous reference on dating, I'm pretty sure there's people who maybe suck at dating, but could be amazing life partners as well. So really work on your soft skills. Good luck before and for your next interview, and don't forget to check out the SEB career pages. Thank you.
Taip, ačiū Andriui. I will ask, talk in English for now. If you guys have any questions, we have a few minutes left, so feel free to raise a hand and we'll come with a mic so you can ask questions for Andrius, okay? Yes, single one.
Yes, hello. I was just curious about the CVs because I know that AI is now really popular, and I'm not sure how everybody else, but I use the AI to write my CV.
Good for you.
But I now realize that I lost my authenticity, as you say. But I'm just curious if it's easy to spot CVs that are written with AIs.
I think we are getting better at it, and it's no secret. Eventually we'll be able to figure out, and everybody will be able to figure out what is authentic, what is AI made. And maybe no one knows what's going to happen in the future, right? But I definitely think that there needs to be this part of yourself, part of authenticity there. Otherwise it's really a text written by a machine, right?
I just use the CV just to basically write why my previous job works with IT. Basically just to give me some idea how I could merge the two things.
But it's perfectly fine to get some inspiration from that. But of course I would also recommend to put a little bit of yourself there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, guy in the first seat, just a sec. Okay, so we'll get to you back, okay?
One more question about CVs. Are there any keywords or eye catchers? What makes them attractive? Or opposite, mistakes when you see CV? Oh, no, I don't want to see this.
Mistakes is a big deal. If it's an obvious or grammar mistake, it's important to make sure that there's none of that there. Also, I would suggest that maybe the standardized versions, like CV passes and stuff like that, I would recommend to avoid that as well. Instead, I think it's very easy to figure out or find some custom design for a CV to make sure you include the key points. Depending on who you ask, they might also say that maybe don't put your photo in it. In my opinion, I would always recommend to have it there. It just makes the CV a little bit more personal and live.
Okay, so for any learning, feedback is quite important, and as you say, going to interviews is also a process of learning. So usually you get an feedback that, well, we saw your some qualities, but in the end it was not enough, and so on. But how would you advise to get more information from the bad side, what you failed, really? Because this is what people avoid talking about, what was not enough, what you failed, and how to get this into conversation.
But that's true. Oftentimes it will be an automated email because, to be honest, many candidates don't even follow up on that. But I absolutely agree. Getting feedback is absolutely important for all of us in our growth path. Therefore, I would recommend just to follow up with your recruiter or hiring manager if you met them and ask for a bit more feedback than there is in the automated email.
So I wanted to ask about what is the most important when you look at the person's experience, because like when you change your jobs and companies too often, that's bad. If you stay at one job or at one company too long, you're not ambitious. If you have, let's say, a gap year, or you changed the roles, the domains, that's a disaster. So what is the most important thing you look there, and what is an ideal candidate's experience for you?
I don't think there is a perfect formula, but also I don't think that we need to overthink it. So long as you have a good enough explanation why that is, I think you will be fine. And it's perfectly normal for people to still be searching, trying to find themselves even further in their careers. I wouldn't be too focused on that, but instead try to figure out a convincing story. Why did you make certain career choices? So there is some alignment.
And we have time for one last question, so who will be the one?
Can you please tell us your top 3 questions you ask on the first interview? So like your bread and butter questions.
Maybe I would be giving out the formula, right? But it's not really like that. Each recruiter, I think, has a different way of going through interviews. Some of them have super structured interviews, and they already know the questions ahead of time that they are going to ask. And some of them, for sure, is going to repeat time from one interview to another. But there's others who just take a more go-with-the-flow approach, and they just try to learn and understand and get to know the person as much as they can. I already mentioned one of my favorite questions, which is, can you tell me about this role? And I'll just fill in the blanks and correct you. But otherwise, I don't think such questions exist, really.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrius. We have a thank you present for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.